was recently talking to the HR director of one of the major banks. One of the major banks that is now currently majorly owned by the British taxpayer. So I felt it was right to probe. And we got into a conversation about appraisals, about how they conduct appraisals within this bank. And they kind of rolled their eyes a little bit and waggled their eyebrows and said, yeah, well, you know how it is. And I went, no, tell me, what do you do? And they said, well, every individual is supposed to write a 6-month development plan for themselves. They send this to their manager. Their manager is then supposed to annotate, suggest, nudge, edit, and then send it back to them so that they have an agreement about what they will be appraised on over the course of the next 6 months. They said, and then what happens is 2 weeks before the appraisal is due, the manager gets a prompt called, don't forget you're appraising Phil in 2 weeks. And then that appraisal is conducted with the manager's manager looking over his shoulder. So part of the manager's appraisal is that his manager gets to watch the appraiser doing the appraising. And he said what generally happens is that 80% of the managers don't quite get round to writing back once the development plans are sent in by the individuals. What happens is that they sit on their desktop until the 2 weeks before the appraisal process is due, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I've got to do an appraisal in 2 weeks. They usually then send back the 6-month plan that the individual wrote saying, I agree with all of your targets. And then they have a relatively uncomfortable and unsettling meeting 2 weeks later when they kind of talk about something that they've not really discussed over the previous 6 months. And that there are so many organisations where when you actually start to talk about appraisal, that it's something that neither manager nor participant is ever particularly looking forward to. It's the way it seems. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but in organisations I've spoken to, very rarely is it something that people look forward to, or indeed something that staff consistently say is enormously valuable to their own self-development within the organisation or their own professional development. You don't see people going, great, it's appraisal day, I'm really looking forward to this. And yet, the purpose behind appraisal should be exactly that, isn't it? Which is to help people's professional and personal development, to help people see the path they're going on in the organisation, to be acknowledged for the contributions that they've made over the previous 6 months or a year, to talk about the future. Surely these things should be something that's joyful to talk about, except that it doesn't seem to be the case very often. And some of that is because people haven't really got anything to talk about. Guy Outram, who you may have met earlier, spoke about people talking about how they're feeling today, but there's nothing to talk about in terms of really how they were feeling, say, 3 months ago. But there is an opportunity, if you can provide proper, decent data on the degree to which people are delivering on the promises that they make to the business or on the requests that are made of them by the business, that you can have appraisals that are about something. And I think the challenge for businesses is how do you make appraisals both direct, relevant and useful tools as opposed to what I think they are now, which is a relatively unpleasant and best to be avoided burden on both the manager and the employee that very rarely moves the relationship of those two individuals forward very far. I mean, I know there are many places where appraisals are done extremely well, but there are just as many where the appraisal process is counterproductive to its aims, that it is abrasive, that is often demeaning, that it's often based on ambiguous data, it's often based upon individual feelings rather than genuine measures, and rarely fulfills its possibility in helping people develop. So if you're able to transform your appraisal system, you might expect employees that feel more valued, that are interested and engaged in both their and their team's professional and personal development. You'll probably see improvements in morale, and you'll have an intrinsic process, something which all companies do. It's kind of an intrinsic part of the business, but does it really make the difference that you want it to make or that it could possibly make? How do you construct an appraisal process which actually delivers on its promise? Because in my experience, most appraisal processes don't really. You know, from a best year yet perspective, there's a methodology which underpins best year yet and pro, which means that you can get accurate performance data at as deep into the organisation as you want to go, either at team level or at individual level, on the degree to which people are actually delivering on their commitments and promises to the business. And that rather than appraisal being a once a year or once every six month process, it actually becomes part of the dynamic of how you manage either the individuals in your team or indeed teams across your organisation, because it provides you with data, unambiguous, unarguable data on how people are doing in terms of delivering on their promise.